Mentally strong people do not live by convenience, they live by principle. They do not chase comfort, they chase clarity, and they do not wait to feel ready before doing what must be done, because they understand that strength is not found in moments of ease, but in how you hold yourself when things become unclear, unfair, uncontrollable. And to hold yourself, you need rules, not rules given to you, but rules you give yourself. Rules that are built, not from theory, but from experience, from mistakes, from failures, from silence, from sitting alone and deciding, this is what I will live by, no matter what the world tries to throw at me. Rule 1: do not respond immediately. A strong mind knows that the first reaction is rarely the best one. When emotions run high, when pride is touched, when fear is stirred, the first response is almost always a defense. But strength does not live in defense. It lives in discernment, the ability to pause, to create space between the stimulus and the response. That space is where your power lives, because in that space you can ask, is this true? Is this necessary? Is this worth my peace? And if it isn't, you let it pass. You don't let the external pull disturb your internal rhythm. You wait. You breathe. You respond only when you've returned to your center. Mentally strong people live from their center. Rule 2: stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It's not your job to teach someone how to see your worth. It's your job to live it, with such consistency that the ones who are meant for you feel it without being told. Mentally strong people do not waste time trying to convince the unwilling. They understand that energy is currency, and explanation is expensive, especially when it's offered to people who have no intention of listening, only of defending their own viewpoint. Let them have it. Let them stay where they are. You go forward. Rule 3: say no without guilt. Mentally strong people protect their time like their peace depends on it, because it does. They do not overextend to be liked. They do not say yes to avoid discomfort. They do not compromise their rest, their rhythm, their responsibilities. For people who would not do the same in return, they understand that a no spoken in clarity is a deeper form of self-respect than a yes whispered in hesitation. They know that boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred, and saying no is how you remain whole in a world that constantly asks you to split yourself in pieces. Rule 4: never argue with emotion, only act with reason. This does not mean you suppress how you feel. It means you learn to hold it without letting it dictate your direction. Mentally strong people acknowledge their emotions. They sit with them. They feel them. But they do not obey them. Because feelings are not facts. And reactions are not solutions. You wait. You watch. You decide when the fire settles and the fog lifts. Because decisions made in emotion often leave behind more to clean up than they solve. Rule 5: you do not have to attend every battle you're invited to. Mentally strong people know that not every conflict is worth their attention. They do not fight to be right. They fight to stay aligned. They do not chase closure that comes at the cost of chaos. They are not interested in winning arguments that cost them their peace. They understand that sometimes walking away is the most powerful statement you'll ever make, because silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy, and peace is worth more than proving a point. Rule 6: protect your attention like it's your life, because it is. Mentally strong people understand that where their attention goes, their life flows. They do not allow distractions to determine their day. They do not scroll mindlessly, then wonder where their energy went. They do not chase the dopamine of instant updates while their deeper dreams remain untouched. They know that focus is their most valuable currency, and so they spend it on what actually moves them forward, not what entertains them for a moment. They remove noise, not because they're antisocial, but because their peace requires signal, and signals are quiet. They are found in the stillness between decisions, in the silence before the insight, in the empty space where your true thoughts have room to breathe. Mentally strong people live in that space. Rule 7. Make fewer decisions, but make them fully. Most people are tired, not from work, but from constant indecision. They touch too many things. They commit without conviction. They leave doors open as if keeping options is the same as keeping power. But mentally strong people know the opposite is true. The fewer the options, the stronger the focus. The more definite the choice, the more powerful the action. They decide what matters, then they move with full presence. They do not multitask purpose. They give their full attention to one thing at a time. And that is why their progress feels steady, even when it looks slow, because it is built on decisions that were not emotional, but essential. Rule 8. Be where your feet are. Presence is the posture of the mentally strong. They are not in yesterday. Regret is not their home. They are not in tomorrow. Anxiety is not their guide. They are here, now, fully, because they know. This moment is the only one that can be shaped, the only one where clarity lives, the only one that deserves their attention. And when they are here, they are not rushed, they are not fragmented, they are whole. Even in pain, they are present. Even in pressure, they are precise. This is not by accident. It is trained through breath, through stillness, through repetition. Because they know presence is not something you find. It is something you practice. Rule 9. Your inner world must be stronger than your outer world. Mentally strong people live from the inside out. They do not react to trends, to noise, to chaos. They respond from values, from principles, from purpose. Because their internal state is not for sale. They do not trade it for validation, for likes, for temporary approval. They protect it, like a sacred space, like a temple. And when life pushes, they do not fall, because they have built roots, deep ones, invisible to the eye, but undeniable in action. That root system is what allows them to remain calm when others collapse. It is what allows them to see clearly when others panic. Because clarity is not a gift, it is a discipline, and that discipline begins within. Rule 10. Learn the power of pause. A mentally strong man knows that he does not need to react immediately. He is not triggered. He is trained. He does not fire back. He breathes first. He does not make noise. He makes decisions. The pause is his power. It allows him to move without regret, to speak without damage, to live with intention instead of impulse. And that pause is not hesitation. It is wisdom, because he knows that urgency is often a trap, and the first voice is not always the voice of truth. He waits until he is centered. Then he moves without apology. This is not slowness, it is strength, the kind of strength that does not shake even when the ground does. Rule 11. Build structure before you need it, because if you only build, when everything falls apart, you will spend your life rebuilding from the rubble instead of rising from the rhythm. Mentally strong people understand that chaos is not a question of if but when, so they don't wait. They build systems while things are stable. They build habits before the crisis. They build identity before the pressure hits. This is preparation, not paranoia, not fear, but wisdom. Because when the world moves and people lose themselves in panic, in blame, in reaction, the strong fall back on something deeper. They fall back on structure, not because they're rigid, but because they're reliable. Because they know that in the moment of overwhelm, the mind looks for pattern. And without structure, all it finds is noise, so they build a pattern of presence. They build rituals that ground them. They wake not into chaos, but into clarity. They start the day with intention, not inbox. They lead with reflection, not reaction. Their mornings are not built for performance. They are built for alignment. They don't rush into the world before returning to their own center. They journal, they breathe, they review their values, not because it's trendy, but because it is necessary. And when the day comes that shakes the world, they are not searching for themselves. In the wreckage, they know who they are, because they rehearsed that self daily. And when life breaks rhythm, they do not break identity. This is structure, not schedule, not task list, not performance. Structure is the invisible frame that holds the weight of all your decisions, so that you don't collapse under uncertainty. It is the system that remembers who you are when your mind forgets. And those who are mentally strong do not fear the ordinary, the boring, the repeated, because they know that repetition is what builds peace. Faster than passion, that slow is strong. That ritual is resilience, that order is oxygen. In a world that suffocates you with urgency, so they prepare, not for applause, but for endurance. They move quietly, not because they are hiding, but because they are building something too deep to explain to people who still live in reaction. That is Rule 11. And then there is Rule 12. Honor what you've outgrown. This is one of the hardest things a strong mind must do, because to outgrow means to shed, to leave, to release. What once made sense, what once felt right, what once defined you. It means letting go of friendships that no longer feed your future. It means walking away from roles that no longer match your identity. It means silencing beliefs that once gave you safety but now sabotage your strength. Most people hold on because letting go feels like betrayal. Betrayal of what they built. Betrayal of those who believed. Betrayal of the past self that worked so hard to get here. But mentally, strong people understand something deeper. Growth is not a betrayal. It is a return to who you were before the world told you who you had to be. It is a remembering of the version of you that was buried, under performance, under pressure, under the praise of others, and to remember him, you must remove everything. He no longer fits in. This means you leave without guilt. This means you shift without apology. This means you evolve without explanation. Because peace is found in releasing what no longer serves your alignment. And everything that belongs to your future will not require you to explain why you had to grow. They will know, because they are growing too. But the ones who cling to who you were will resist. Let them, not with resentment, but with reverence. Reverence for the fact that you no longer need to shrink to be understood, that your life is no longer lived to maintain what was, but to step fully into what is. And when you do, something strange happens. You stop needing closure. You stop needing permission. You stop needing approval. Because clarity takes the place of all those things, and that clarity gives you energy. Energy to move, not in circles but forward. Energy to stop fixing what only breaks you. Energy to pour into the people, the spaces, the future that match your frequency. This is what happens when you honor what you've outgrown. You no longer fight to hold on. You fight to stay aligned. You no longer beg to be accepted. You accept that peace is a path few are willing to walk, and you walk it anyway. Not because you're unkind, but because you're clear. Not because you're bitter, but because you're building. Not because you're above them, but because you are done being beneath yourself. That is the silent rule that guides all the others. You do not need to explain your evolution. You only need to live it. The strength you build does not always look like strength to others. Sometimes it looks like saying nothing, when everything inside you wants to respond. Sometimes it looks like walking away, when everything around you tells you to stay. Sometimes it looks like being misunderstood, because explaining yourself would cost you your peace. Mentally strong people do not need to be seen to be sure, do not need to be praised to be aligned, do not need to be loud to be powerful. They have reached a level of clarity that no longer requires an audience. They know that some of the most powerful choices are the ones no one ever sees. Waking up when no one is watching. Training your mind when no one is keeping score. Telling the truth when lying would make life easier. This is what self-respect sounds like when it's quiet. Because rule number 13, even if it was never written, is this: you do not need to be applauded for doing what's right, and that changes everything. Because when you no longer seek permission, you reclaim your energy. The energy you spent on wondering what they think. The energy you spent on over-explaining your choices. The energy you spent trying to be palatable to people who still don't understand themselves. Now, that energy returns to you, and with it comes focus. A level of focus that feels foreign to most. Because most people are addicted to distraction. They are always connected, yet rarely present. Always busy, yet rarely intentional. Always informed, yet rarely wise. But not you. Not anymore. Mentally strong people have made a decision to focus not just their time but their attention, not just their calendar but their mind, and from that focus comes simplicity. They stop chasing everything so they can go deep into what matters. They stop trying to fix everyone so they can finally heal themselves. They stop being everywhere so they can be fully exactly where they are. This is rule number 14. Choose depth over width. In your work, in your relationships, in your routines, in your thoughts, because width often impresses, but depth transforms. The world teaches you to expand, to go wide, to do more. But strength is built by doing less, with more intensity, more presence, more mastery. Not many things, but the right things. Repeated, refined, respected. That's what creates real impact. Not how much, but how precise. Not how far, but how rooted. Not how fast, but how focused. So mentally strong people subtract. They remove what dilutes their power. They delete what no longer matches their pace. They distance what constantly steals their mental space. And in doing so, they gain something more valuable than recognition. They gain freedom. Freedom to be still, while others chase. Freedom to move slow, while others panic. Freedom to build quietly, without needing to prove that they are building at all. And that freedom feels unfamiliar at first because the world has told you that if you're not hustling, you're behind. That if you're not visible, you're irrelevant. That if you're not available, you're selfish. But all of that was designed to keep you distracted from your own peace. And peace is your responsibility now. It is no longer something you hope for. It is something you maintain. It is something you build into your days like oxygen. You guard it. From conversations that lead nowhere, you protect it from people who love chaos more than change. You enforce it, not with anger, but with absence. Because your presence is now too valuable to be spent without intention. This is what mentally strong people understand, that their energy is their ecosystem, and every thought, every choice, every voice they allow in, shapes the world they live in internally. So, they become ruthless not in spirit but in standard, not because they're cold, but because they are finally warm enough to stop living in spaces that never gave them heat. That is strength, not the kind you post, but the kind you live, not the kind that performs, but the kind that protects your mind, your time, your future. You begin to walk differently when your steps no longer chase validation but echo your values. When your silence no longer hides confusion but confirms clarity. When your presence is not for attention but alignment. That's the shift. And that shift is invisible to most because it's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not packaged for performance. It's simply real, consistent, unapologetic. Rule 15. Let your consistency speak louder than your confidence. Mentally strong people do not depend on how they feel. To do what they know must be done, they do not wait for motivation. They rely on identity, because when your actions are rooted in identity, you no longer wake up wondering if you feel like it. You already decided. They write, even when the words feel slow. They train, even when the mind resists. They rest, even when the world says to hustle. Their days are not dictated by emotion, but by design. This is how peace is built, not in the highs, but in the habits. And those habits are protected fiercely, not just from external pressure, but from internal sabotage. From the voice that says it's fine to skip today. It's okay to lower the standard. It doesn't really matter. They hear that voice, but they do not obey it. Because they know that strength is not the absence of weakness, it's the discipline to choose differently, even when the weakness is loud. And so they continue, without drama, without announcement, without needing to feel inspired. They keep their promises to themselves, because self-trust is sacred. And once that trust is built, they will not break it for convenience. Rule 16. Never outsource responsibility. Mentally, strong people take ownership for what they can control. Their mood, their mindset, their movement. They do not wait for better conditions. They create better conditions from within. They do not blame their past, their parents, their pain. They understand that none of that is in their hands anymore. But today is, and so is their response. They do not hand their power to people who do not carry their consequences. They do not depend on others to rescue them. From habits they are unwilling to release. They look in the mirror, not for affirmation but for alignment. They ask what needs to shift here now without excuse. And when they find it, they act, not emotionally, but deliberately, because action without ownership is shallow. But action with ownership creates depth. It creates movement that is rooted, not rushed. Progress that is grounded, not performed. Rule 17. Forgive without permission. This is one of the hardest things, because the mind wants closure, it wants an apology, it wants acknowledgement. But mentally strong people do not wait for someone else to set them free. They choose to release what no longer belongs in their emotional space, not because the other person deserves it, but because they do. They deserve to live without replaying conversations that will never end. They deserve to be light, even if the other never takes responsibility. They deserve to move on, without dragging bitterness into their next season. So they forgive, not to restore the past, but to reclaim the present. Because forgiveness is not saying it was okay, it's saying I will not carry this one more day. And when they do, peace returns. It doesn't knock loudly. It simply shows up. In how they breathe, in how they sleep, in how they no longer need to win arguments that no longer matter. Because what matters is their clarity, their calm, their character. And those are not shaped by holding on, but by letting go. Rule 18. Discipline over drama. Every time. Mentally strong people do not escalate. They evaluate. They do not match noise with noise. They rise above it with non-reaction. Because they understand that drama is seductive. It promises attention. It feels like release. It creates the illusion of control. But it always leaves a mess. Discipline, on the other hand, is quiet. It doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't entertain. It doesn't rush. But it always builds something solid. And that solidity is what holds them when the world spins. It's what keeps them from making impulsive choices just to feel something. It's what allows them to feel deeply but act wisely. They are not cold. They are clear. They are not hard. They are honest. And because of that, they do not bleed for things that only want their reaction, not their resolution. This is what mental strength looks like in real time. Not in crisis, but in character. Not in speed, but in stillness. Not in how loud you shout, but in how consistently you show up without noise, without escape, without compromise. They don't tell you how many things you'll have to say no to. When you say yes to peace, they don't prepare you for how lonely it feels to finally stop lying about who you are and what you need. They don't warn you that strength will often be misunderstood as coldness, that clarity will often look like distance to those still living in confusion. But mentally strong people walk that path anyway, because they know that self-betrayal is not a fair price for companionship, that if presence requires pretending, it's not a presence worth keeping. So they choose peace over proximity, truth over comfort, clarity over performance. Rule 19. Never trade your standard for their approval. Mentally strong people do not negotiate with pressure. They don't lower their integrity because the room is loud. They don't change their pace because someone else is impatient. They live by inner code, and that code is not flexible, not because they're rigid, but because they're rooted. They know who they are. They've spent time in silence to find it. They've written, rewritten, and refined that code so many times that by the time someone questions it, it's no longer up for discussion. They don't need to defend it. They simply live it, because they've learned that the cost of betraying it is higher than any discomfort they might face for standing alone. They'd rather walk alone with alignment than join the crowd with regret. Rule 20. Stay calm when it's easier to panic. This is not just a trait, it's a skill, one that is trained, not inherited. Mentally strong people do not stay calm because they were born different. They stay calm because they've practiced presence in pressure. They've made it a habit to pause before responding. They've trained themselves to breathe before reacting. And because of that, they become the anchor when the storm hits. Not just for others, but for themselves. Because the mind follows the breath. And when the breath is steady, the mind becomes clear. Clarity is what gives them strength when others lose theirs. They are not the loudest. They are the most composed. And in that composure is where their real influence lives. People trust what does not flinch. People respect what does not collapse. People follow what stays grounded when everything else is shaking. That is the value of calm. It is not just a posture. It is protection. Rule 21. Practice being misunderstood without explanation. This is the advanced training. Because the moment you stop explaining, you begin trusting. Not others, yourself. Mentally strong people know that most people don't want truth. They want comfort, and truth is uncomfortable. So they stop wasting energy trying to be understood by those committed to their own version of reality. They stop breaking down their convictions into bite-sized opinions just to feel accepted. They live with quiet clarity because peace is louder than persuasion. They trust that those who are meant to understand will feel it without the need for a 10-minute justification, and those who don't were never listening to begin with. So they say less, but mean more. They share less, but feel deeper. They live not to be explained, but to be expressed. Rule 22. Return to silence often, because the world will try to pull you into its rhythm. It will tell you faster is better. Louder is stronger. More is always the goal. But mentally strong people disagree. They know that silence is not the absence of thought. It is the beginning of wisdom. They return to it, not when they are overwhelmed, but before. They protect space, to be alone, to listen, to slow down, to recalibrate. Because silence is not emptiness, it's alignment. And from that place they hear things others miss. They see things others overlook. They reset before they break. This is why they last longer. Move cleaner, decide sharper. Because they've made stillness a strategy. And that stillness is not passive. It's powerful. It is where they recharge, where they reconnect, where they remember what actually matters. So they return to it religiously. ruthlessly, respectfully, because silence is how they stay whole. In a world that wants them scattered, you know you're getting stronger when silence becomes your favorite response. Not because you are afraid to speak, but because you no longer feel the need to. You understand now that not everything needs an answer. Not every situation needs your opinion. Not every reaction deserves a reply. Sometimes the strongest move is to remain still, not passive, not weak. Still, because stillness is where clarity lives, and from that clarity you move with more precision than noise ever could. Rule 23. Speak only when your words carry more weight than your silence. Mentally strong people do not speak to fill space. They speak to create impact. Their words are not decoration, they are decision. They don't tell people what to think. They live in such a way that their presence speaks for itself. They do not argue to win. They speak to realign, and if alignment is not possible, they do not force it with more volume. They exit the conversation with calm, with clarity, with full conviction that their integrity is not up for negotiation. Because when you learn to value silence, you no longer waste your voice trying to fix what doesn't want repair. Rule 24. Build peace. You don't have to escape from. Most people live for the weekend, for the break, for the vacation. Mentally strong people build a life they don't need to run from. They do not burn out just to earn 2 days of recovery. They don't treat rest like a luxury. They build it into the rhythm. Their days are not designed for burnout. They are designed for balance because sustainability matters more than sprints. They do not wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. They honor themselves by staying well, physically, mentally, emotionally. They don't wait for breakdown to justify pause. They don't earn peace. They prioritize it, and that makes their decisions sharper, their vision clearer, their impact deeper. Because a tired mind cannot see clearly. A burned-out heart cannot love properly. A scattered life cannot hold purpose. So they protect peace like its purpose. And because of that, they live fully, not just when the world pauses, but even in the middle of the pressure. Rule 25. Let go of needing closure. Mentally strong. People do not chase endings that keep opening wounds. They do not revisit conversations that already told them everything they needed to know. They do not beg for explanations from people who already showed them their capacity. They close the door, quietly, internally, fully, because closure is not something you're given. It's something you claim. It's the decision to stop bleeding for answers that won't change the truth. It's the choice to stop waiting for a moment that may never come. They don't need a final word. They need a final decision. And they make it not with drama, but with dignity. Because peace is not found in someone else's apology. It's found in your own decision to move forward without resentment. Rule 26. Remember, you are not here to be liked. You are here to be real. Mentally strong people do not shapeshift for acceptance. They do not edit their truth to match the room. They do not abandon their edge to avoid discomfort. They live in alignment, not performance. They walk with presence, not persuasion. They act from principle, not popularity. And because of that, not everyone will like them. But the ones who matter will trust them, because real is rare, and trust is built on truth, not on agreement. They do not apologize for making people uncomfortable if the discomfort comes from honesty, because honesty is not aggression, it's clarity. And clarity is not cruelty, it's leadership. And this is the leadership of a mentally strong person, not loud, but consistent, not pleasing, but principled, not everywhere, but deeply rooted. Where they are, they do not waste their strength trying to be digestible to everyone. They honor their truth and let those who resonate come close. There's a difference between people who look strong and people who are strong. One needs attention, the other needs alignment. One speaks about strength, the other moves in silence. One depends on external approval, the other depends on internal order, and that's what defines Rule 27. Let your life be quiet but undeniable. Mentally strong people do not shout their process. They let their results speak quietly. For those who have the eyes to see, they are not performers. They are practitioners, and that practice is often unseen, uncelebrated, unnoticed, but unshakable. They understand that visibility is not the goal. Depth is, and depth is not crowded, which is why mentally strong people do not fear solitude. Rule 28. Use solitude to sharpen your mind. Solitude is not loneliness, it is space, it is clarity. It is where noise stops and truth begins. Most people avoid it because solitude confronts you with yourself, your thoughts, your habits, your identity, your fear, your excuses. But mentally strong people enter that space willingly, repeatedly, gratefully, because they know that nothing great is built without space, space to reflect, to review, to refine. Solitude is how they sharpen their tools before the battle. It is how they build before the crowd ever sees. And when the crowd disappears, they are not shaken, because their foundation was never built for performance. Rule 29. Be consistent, especially when no one claps, because applause is a poor measure of alignment. Mentally strong people do not rely on recognition to stay on course. They understand that some of their best work will go unseen, unthanked, uncelebrated, and they do it anyway. They are not motivated by being noticed. They are motivated by becoming what they know they must become, because integrity is not what you do when people are watching. It's what you repeat when no one ever sees. And peace is what grows when you do the right thing without expecting reward. Rule 30. Be slow to speak and slower to judge. Mentally strong people don't rush to conclusions. They understand that life is nuanced, that people are layered, that truth is deeper than first impressions. They ask before they assume. They listen before they reply. They observe before they act. And in doing so, they create space for clarity. Because judgment without understanding is violence, and clarity without pause is shallow. So they pause, they examine, they reflect. Not because they're indecisive, but because their decisions carry weight. Rule 31. Move with purpose, not pressure. Pressure says you should do more faster now. Purpose says do what matters, with care, with courage, without noise. Mentally strong people don't confuse urgency with importance. They know that most pressure is manufactured by timelines that were never theirs, by people who don't understand their mission, by systems that profit from their anxiety. So they step back, they ask, is this my path or just a pattern? And they choose not speed but sovereignty. They move when the decision is clear, not when the world demands it. And that is how they preserve energy while the world burns out. Rule 32. Let discomfort refine you, not define you. Mentally strong people do not avoid hard things, they use them. They let pain polish their patience. They let stress reveal their structure. They let heartbreak open a deeper honesty. They are not immune to pain. They are intimate with it, but they do not wear it as identity. They know that pain is not a life sentence. It is a signal to shift, to grow, to release, to awaken. They respect discomfort, not because they love suffering, but because they know it's the doorway to depth. And depth is the soil where peace grows. Mentally strong people don't flinch when they feel pressure. They don't fold when the room goes silent. They don't panic when the outcome is uncertain. They've trained for that moment, in quiet, in repetition, in solitude, because they know that who you are under pressure is who you truly are. And when everything is stripped away, the only thing left is your internal code. That's what they live by. not comfort, not crowd, not chaos. Code. And that leads us to Rule 33. Know your code, and never violate it for approval. This isn't about being rigid. It's about being real. Because the truth is, if you don't write your code, the world will write it for you. It will tell you to chase validation, to choose speed over depth, to say yes, when everything inside you says no. But mentally strong people have already decided who they are. They've decided what they tolerate, what they pursue, what they will no longer explain. And from that decision, they move differently. They walk into rooms and do not shift their posture to match the energy. They bring their standard into every interaction and let the world adjust to them, not with arrogance, but with alignment. Because when your life is led from internal order, you don't need to yell, you don't need to fight, you don't even need to prove. You just live with such clarity that others begin to question their own noise. Rule 34. Build a mind that can hold contradiction. Mentally strong people understand that life is not binary, that you can be grieving and still be grateful, that you can be uncertain and still move forward, that you can be healing and still be whole. They do not panic when things feel gray. They lean in. They reflect. They allow complexity to coexist with confidence. They are not shaken by paradox, because they know that strength is not found in pretending you figured it all out. It's found in remaining still when things don't yet make sense. And in that stillness, they discover patterns, because stillness is what reveals the signal from the noise. Rule 35. Train your mind before you need it. This rule is not about intellect, it's about readiness. Mentally strong people don't wait for the storm to start preparing. They train daily, in small moments when things are good, when life is quiet, because they know that peace is built, not in reaction, but in repetition. They rehearse their values. They reflect on their patterns. They strengthen their attention, so that when life demands more, they don't have to find it. They already have it. They build mental muscle by saying no when yes is easier, by staying consistent when no one is watching, by showing restraint when provoked. That is their preparation. It's not glamorous. It's not loud. It's not even visible. But when the world trembles, they don't, because they are not reacting. They are remembering what they've already trained for. Rule 36. Let truth cost what it must. This one is not easy, because truth often costs comfort. It costs closeness. It costs image. But mentally strong people choose it anyway, because they know that a lie, even a small one, will rot your peace from the inside out. They don't play roles. They don't fake alignment. They don't nod when their soul is shaking. They speak even when their voice shakes. They walk even when the path is unclear. They stand even when standing means standing alone. Because peace is not built on pretending. It is built on truth that is lived, not just spoken, and that truth will not always be welcomed. But they do not need welcome. They need integrity. Rule 37. Respect your energy as your most sacred asset. Time is important, but energy determines the quality of how you spend it. Mentally strong people do not waste it, not on arguing with people who don't want resolution, not on opportunities that don't match their mission, not on proving what can only be lived. They protect their mornings. They honor their evenings. They track where their energy leaks and close those gaps without guilt, because energy is what builds everything. And if it's scattered, so is your life. They choose what feeds them, not what flatters them. They invest in what restores them, not what drains them, and they release what pulls them into cycles that no longer match their vision. Because a focused life is not built by doing more, it's built by protecting what matters most. You don't lead a powerful life by chance, you lead it by choice, by intentional decisions repeated until they become instinct. That's what makes someone mentally strong. Not just that they endure hard things, but that they choose how to respond when no one's watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, no reinforcement, just them. And the question, will I honor what I said I would? Rule 38. Do what's right, not what's easy. This sounds simple until you face it, until it's easier to look the other way, to say yes just to keep the peace, to stay quiet when speaking truth will cost you. But mentally strong people choose what's right, even when it breaks their comfort, because comfort has never built character. They know that every time they choose integrity over ease, they build something invisible but indestructible. They build self-respect, and self-respect is not something you can fake. You either have it or you don't. It's in how you carry yourself when no one applauds you. It's in how you finish what you start when no one is pushing you. It's in how you walk away from shortcuts that would have brought quicker results at the expense of your soul. Rule 39. Audit your life like a strategist, not a victim. Mentally strong people don't sit in blame. They sit in reflection. They don't ask, why did this happen to me? They ask, what is this teaching me? They look at their habits, their relationships, their routines, and they ask, what is aligned? And what needs to go? They're not afraid to change systems, to rewrite priorities, to release outdated versions of themselves, because they understand that just because something worked in the past doesn't mean it belongs in the future. They are not attached to the method. They are committed to the mission, and if something no longer serves that mission, it is removed without drama. Rule 40. Let people be wrong about you in peace. This is one of the greatest freedoms a mentally strong person will ever earn. The freedom to no longer need to explain yourself to people who have already decided what version of you they are committed to believing. They do not chase clarity from closed minds. They do not argue with assumptions. They do not defend what is already demonstrated by how they live. They let the misunderstanding exist without resistance, because they understand that sometimes silence is the highest form of self-trust, and that trust grows. Every time they choose not to engage with projections that were never theirs to hold, they are not here to be understood by everyone. They are here to be aligned with the few who are walking the same path. Rule 41. Build before you're ready. Mentally strong people don't wait for full clarity, because they know that clarity often follows action, not precedes it. They move with what they have. They speak with the voice they've grown. They show up even if they feel just a little bit unsure. They don't need perfection to begin. They need courage. And that courage doesn't roar. It whispers, do it anyway. So they build quietly, faithfully, brick by brick. And over time they become what others call prepared, but it was never preparation that led them. It was decision. A decision to no longer delay. The version of themselves they know they were built to become. Rule 42. Don't confuse peace with passivity. Peace is not doing nothing. It is doing the right thing with the right tone at the right time. Mentally strong people are not afraid to confront, to correct, to change, but they do it from presence, not pressure. They are not driven by chaos, but by clarity. So when they act, it lands. Not because it's louder, but because it's aligned. And when they speak, it resonates. Because their words come from stillness, not from survival. That is the difference. Peace does not mean inaction. It means focused, precise, powerful action, with nothing wasted. Rule 43. Honor your pace, even when it doesn't match the world. Mentally strong people don't rush, because rushing breaks rhythm. They don't force growth, because forced growth creates shallow roots. They honor their season. They protect their rhythm. They move with awareness, not anxiety, because alignment has no competition. And in honoring their pace, they arrive exactly where they're supposed to be, on time, every time. There comes a point where nothing outside of you can disturb the stillness you've built inside. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've trained yourself to remain unmoved when it matters most. Rule 44. Remain emotionally neutral in moments of chaos. Mentally strong people understand that emotion is not weakness, but untrained emotion becomes self-sabotage. So they practice the pause, not to suppress, but to observe. Not to numb, but to respond. From truth, not reaction. They don't allow one bad hour to rewrite the entire day. They don't allow one person's tone to shift their internal state. They don't allow temporary noise to disrupt permanent standards. They stay neutral, grounded, even when the moment is heated, because they know the moment will pass, and how they hold themselves in that space determines everything. Rule 45. Respect what peace costs. Peace isn't free. It costs you distraction. It costs you relationships that thrive on drama. It costs you approval from those who needed you to remain small, to feel big. Mentally strong people don't chase peace as a reward. They choose peace as a requirement. They're willing to disappoint the world, to remain loyal to themselves. And that disappointment is often misunderstood. But they do not flinch, because what they lose in attention, they gain in alignment. They sleep better. They move cleaner. They think clearer. Because peace isn't the absence of pressure. It's the refusal to invite unnecessary weight into your mind, your space, your system. And mentally strong people understand that maintaining peace is not about control, but about commitment. A commitment to not entertain what makes them question their clarity. Rule 46. Live more from intention, less from impulse. Mentally, strong people do not move because they feel like it. They move because it's time. They don't wait for a perfect mood to keep a promise. They show up even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, because impulse seeks relief, but intention builds resilience. So they move from principle even when emotion protests. They practice saying no, even when temptation whispers. They practice slowing down when anxiety tells them to rush. They practice noticing before reacting, and over time, that practice becomes identity. They no longer rely on circumstances to shape their consistency. They shape it daily through deliberate, sustainable discipline. Rule 47. Refuse to chase people who left when it was inconvenient. Mentally strong people don't resent those who couldn't stay, but they also don't chase. Because loyalty that depends on comfort was never loyalty at all. They don't beg for conversations that never asked to begin. They don't revisit connections that only returned when the glow came back. They bless the moment, they release the memory, and they walk forward without resentment, because their value was never tied to who decided to leave. It's tied to who they became after the silence. Rule 48. You owe no one access to a version of you you've outgrown. Just because they were there for a chapter doesn't mean they're written into the ending. Mentally strong people understand that evolution requires exit. Exit from identity that no longer fits. Exit from spaces that only honor who you were, not who you are. They don't force belonging. They don't perform familiarity. They don't keep repeating what they've already learned. They graduate without ceremony, and they celebrate without audience. Because not every shift needs to be witnessed. Some of the most powerful transitions are internal, and when those transitions are honored, new alignment arrives, naturally. Rule 49. Be unshakable. Not because life is easy, but because your foundation is built. Mentally strong people don't pretend life is painless. They just refuse to fall apart. Every time pain arrives, they've built structure, they've practiced resilience. They've rehearsed clarity so many times that when disruption comes, they are not surprised. They are steady, and that steadiness is not luck. It's labor, the labor of letting go, of no longer reacting, of refusing to carry what doesn't belong. And through that labor, they've built something more permanent than security. They've built stability. And that is what makes their presence powerful. Not because it demands attention, but because it doesn't need to. There comes a point where strength no longer looks like resistance. It looks like peace. Where strength no longer sounds like confidence. It sounds like calm. Where strength is no longer shown through domination, but through discipline. And when you reach that point, you realize you are no longer proving, you are simply living. Rule 50. Stop trying to be understood by those who have no interest in understanding themselves. Mentally strong people no longer explain their path to those who have not walked even a mile. In silence, they do not translate their clarity. For minds still clouded by distraction, by noise, by external praise, they live, and that life becomes the loudest response. They do not retaliate, they recenter. They do not explain, they execute. Because explanation is often a trap that drags you back into dynamics you've already evolved beyond. So they choose to walk forward, in silence, in strength, in certainty. Rule 51. Live in such a way that you don't have to recover from your own decisions. This is what peace feels like. Not waking up with regret. Not second-guessing every step. Not overthinking every boundary you set. Just living with rhythm, with stillness, with purpose. Mentally strong people don't aim for perfect. They aim for integrity, and integrity is what makes life light. Because when your decisions are rooted in principle, you don't carry confusion. You don't need to remember what you said to please them. You don't need to manage a persona you crafted for approval. You just show up as yourself, everywhere. That is the ultimate liberation. Rule 52. Let your old life die, so the new one can breathe. Mentally strong people are not hoarders of versions they've outgrown. They bury the masks, they burn the scripts, they bless the chapters that no longer match their energy, because they know that new peace requires new patterns, and those patterns require space. So they make room by releasing, not just things, but identities. They let go of the fixer, the performer, the caretaker of people who never once took care of them. They let go of the need to be seen by those who only ever looked to judge. They let go of the responsibility to make everyone comfortable at the cost of their own truth. And in that letting go, they become unstoppable, because they are no longer driven by wounds but by wisdom. Rule 53. Remember, you are not late. You are just early in your own timeline. Mentally strong people have stopped comparing clocks. They no longer panic at the pace of others. They no longer shrink when someone else appears to be ahead, because they understand that timing is not a race, but a rhythm, and their rhythm is sacred. So they move with peace, with presence, without apology. They arrive when it's time, not when it's loud, not when it's expected, not when they're pushed. They arrive when they're ready, and that readiness is built in silence. Rule 54. Don't fear being alone. Fear being disconnected from yourself. This is what mentally strong people know, that being surrounded means nothing. If you are split internally, that applause feels hollow if you abandon your values to get it. That success is poison if it cost your soul. So they prioritize presence, not popularity. They prioritize truth, not traction. They prioritize quiet over constant stimulation, because they are no longer addicted to noise. They are in love with peace. And in that love, they protect it with everything they've got. Because it took years to build. It took countless hard choices, uncomfortable conversations, early mornings, lonely nights. But now it's theirs. And it is not for sale. Rule 55. Master yourself, so nothing else does. Mentally strong people are not controlled by money, by praise, by trends, by timelines, by attention. They are only governed by one thing: discipline. And that discipline is not heavy. It is freedom. Because when you are no longer ruled by impulses, by moods, by what they said, or what they think, you become the most dangerous kind of human. The one who is still. The one who is clear. The one who cannot be provoked by noise or pulled by temptation. That is real power. Quiet, anchored, unshakable. The kind of power you don't post about, because it's felt long before it's spoken. And that is the final rule. Let your presence do what your voice no longer needs to.